Greetings, family. This is IMAHKÜS Njinga Okofu Ababio, affectionately known as Mama IMAHKÜS. I invite you to continue on the journey with me. Returning home ain't easy, but it sure is a blessing. But I also invite you to come and visit with us in Rwanda, the country of 1,000 hills. Chapter 3, Akwaba. Akwaba means welcome. So this was it. Ghana, tropical climate, population of approximately 15 million people of various ethnic backgrounds, previously known as the Gold Coast until 1957, when the late President Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah led the one-time British colony to independence and renamed it Ghana after an ancient kingdom that included parts of Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal. Ghana, the home of my ancestors. We arrived at Kotoka International Airport in Accra on the 23rd of August at 11 p.m. We would be here until the 4th of September. Once again, we were going through customs clearance, document checks, and securing our luggage. Things seemed to move a little more smoothly in Accra, and the attitude of the people was much better, and they were friendlier. People smiled and offered to help you. Welcome home could be heard from some of the people, porters, customs officers, as they greeted us. And much to my surprise, contrary to our earlier African welcome, representatives from the Ghana Tourist Board also met us. They brought a large, comfortable bus to convey us to Takoradi. Great, I thought. The tourist board representative said we should come with them. However, the brother who invited us there to meet us, was there to meet us and had also made arrangements for our transportation and got into a shouting match with the tourist board. "Get lost," he told them as they argued back and forth, like they were bartering for us. After much ado, our group leader convinced the tourist board representative that we felt safe and would go along with the young man who had invited us. We really didn't have a lot of choices. This was a strange land. It was after midnight and we were exhausted. I never did find out who had arranged for the tourist board to meet us. There were 2 smaller buses to convey us to Cape Coast. As the first bus took off into the night, I had no idea where I was, nor did I know where the other bus had disappeared. It had been behind us until we got to the police barrier. As we were having our bus checked, a feeling of terror came over me at the sight of these big black men in black military uniforms coming out of the dark, carrying automatic weapons and demanding information on our destination. The driver spoke rapidly to the soldiers in Fanti. It sounded like they were arguing, but I didn't have a clue as to what they were saying. The driver referred the soldiers to the second bus that was carrying our host, but it was nowhere to be seen. Next, the soldiers boarded our bus, their machine guns under their arms, shining their flashlight in our faces. "Where are you from?" they demanded, to no one in particular. Someone responded, "From America. What's the problem?" The soldier only glared at us as they marched up and down the tight aisle of the bus. "What is in the cases?" they demanded. Another voice, "It's our clothes and personal belongings." Oh, Lord, I prayed to myself, please don't let them shoot us. I was scared, as were most of us. This was a totally new experience to us. I was shaking and almost pissed in my drawers. But then again, as I thought about it, why was I so frightened at the sight of black men in black uniforms and carrying automatic weapons? Didn't white men in black uniforms carrying automatic weapons and billy clubs protect and kill innocent black people in self-defense in the United States all the time? Now that is fear. Feeling a little more relaxed, I sort of chilled out. After a little more delay, we were permitted to continue on our journey. Everyone began talking at the same time. Man, what was that? What the hell was that all about? One brother asked the driver. They just wanted a dash, he said. Dash? Someone else asked. What is a dash? Yes, they want you to give them something. It happens to the drivers all the time, he continued. I gave him something small so he would let us go. When they saw foreigners, they know you have plenty of money. We all laughed at that, for in America it was called a bribe or a stick-up, and as far as plenty money, everybody on the bus had saved a long time for this trip. It had been a sacrifice for most of us to even make this journey. In fact, there was little left to do much with. We were riding on our plenty money. It was dark, and there was nothing to see. So settling in again, most of us went to sleep. We traveled quietly for approximately 3 hours until we reached our destination in Cape Coast. The driver took us directly to our hotel. We pulled off the road and into a dark driveway. I didn't have a clue as to where we were, but I knew that we were near the ocean because I could hear the sound of the crashing waves. As we descended from the bus, there were no lights on in the place, only a small lantern. The lights have gone out, said a lady sitting nearby, what looked like a bar. But we're using kerosene lanterns. No problem, I said. We're just beat and want to lay down. Can you please show us to our rooms? I asked tiredly. It was difficult to see our surrounding very well. I soon found out the name of the place was called Apotec. However, the first room we were shown was painted a sickly green and had no linen on the bed. The room was only big enough for one person, and the bed was made of concrete and covered with a small, thin, damp foam mattress. You don't expect anyone to stay in there, one of the brothers said. Let's see something else. But all the rooms were the same, some a little worse. Some of the people in the group were getting very upset because they had paid a lot of money for this trip, and this was not what they expected. To make bad matters worse, the second bus with our host and tour leader had still not arrived. Since I was a somewhat seasoned travel agent, I set about trying to calm folks' nerves. Please don't be upset, I reasoned with the group. I'm sure there's an explanation. We'll just have to wait for the other bus to arrive. But folks were grumbling and rumbling and ready to go to war. Shortly thereafter, the other members of our tour group arrived. They had stopped for a cold beer along the way and were in quite a jovial mood when they arrived. However, that quickly changed when they saw where they were expected to sleep. 17 irate brothers and sisters from America went completely off, shouting. Some of them were ready to strangle our host. They had paid their hard-earned money for this trip, and they expected decent air-conditioned accommodations. These arrangements were totally unacceptable to everyone, and they demanded to be taken elsewhere. If there had been sheets on the beds, I could probably have made it through the night. I was used to roughing it, having been a camper and having backpacked through South America. However, the rest of the folks were not having any of this. When the smoke cleared, we wound up at Dan's Paradise, a hotel in the middle of town. The rooms were clean. Some of them were air-conditioned, but there was no running water. So each room was given a bucket of water. We were too tired to argue any further, It was now 3 in the morning, and some of us had been on the move for more than 24 hours. Elder B, Cohane's dad, and it were the only ones who had not been assigned to a room, and there was only one left. He started joking about the sleeping arrangements and said it would cost me, but he'd be nice to me this time and let me have his room and bunk with some of the guys. I could not go any further. I went to the room gifted to me and crashed. Good night and welcome home. After a refreshing nap in my clothes, I arose to a bright and sunny morning. After washing the fuzzy monster out of my mouth, I ventured outside. I was the only one awake at that time. The air smelled so good, and a gentle breeze was blowing. In the distance, you could hear the sounds of crashing waves and swish, swish sounds of people sweeping. This was really Africa. I still couldn't believe I was here. Gradually, the others began to make their way out of their rooms. Folks appeared to be feeling a little better, though still pissed off. The conversation centered on the previous night and the dissatisfaction with our current arrangements. Unfortunately, the only thing we could do was wait for our host. He better come with some good news, I thought to myself, or someone is subject to stomp a mud hole in his ass. While we were waiting for him, two of the other tour leaders, Sister Yedida from Mount Vernon, who had been living in Ghana for the past 6 months, and Sister Tamakia, a resident Ghanaian, went in search for a better place for us to stay. Something closer to the ocean and with running water. In the meantime, we made the best of our situation, enjoying ourselves over breakfast. Across from the hotel, on top of a hill, was a primary school, and little children in brown and beige uniforms were running up and down in the yard playing. Having eaten my breakfast and no longer wanting to discuss the previous night any further, a couple of us decided to visit the school. As I was climbing up the side of a small rocky mountain covered with tall grass and thorns, talking to myself, I couldn't imagine having to do this every day, but I was also not 10 years old either. Puffing and blowing, I made my way up the uneven terrain. How did the teachers get here? I asked no one in particular. One brother, Eugene Red, commented jokingly, "This was your idea, sister, so don't complain. I'm as crazy as you are for following you." But he and his wife kept climbing, puffing and blowing all the way. However, the climb was worth it. Once at the top, it offered a fantastic, breathtaking view of the town and overlooked the hotel. And the children were all so wonderful. "Take my picture, take my picture," they chimed in together. "Take my name and address. Write me when you get back to America." Some of them, a little frightened of us, ran a distance from us. There were so many beautiful black faces, smiling, laughing, and respectful. No cursing and swearing or disrespect for their teachers and visitors. Some of the classes were in session, and when we walked into the classroom, children stood up and greeted us in unison. "Good morning, madame. Good morning, sir." The teacher invited us and welcomed us to Ghana. These school children were a real pleasure. Other members of our group joined, and we had a great time posing for pictures and interacting with the students and teachers. Everywhere I looked, I saw young, bright, and beautiful African faces. Plenty of black folks here, and it felt so good. It felt so good to be home. Our host finally arrived, and we departed to our new location. I prayed our accommodations would be better because anything worse would have resulted in the lynching of our host. However, We were pleasantly surprised. The hotel was clean, recently completed, and on the Gulf of Guinea. It afforded us a clear view of the Elmina Castle dungeons in the distance. It's difficult to describe my feelings at that time. I was happy because I was in Africa for the first time, but I miss being able to share this momentous occasion with my husband, and I so wanted to share it with him. I was also overwhelmed and sad at the thought of my ancestors being housed in that ominous and foreboding-looking building called the Elmina Castle Dungeons. I was equally sad because Margaret had never gotten the opportunity to make this journey with me. I spent some time in prayer and meditation. I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Coming to Africa for the first time is an emotional experience for some of us. It can be a real heart-wrenching, but regardless, I was home. I was really home. I just couldn't believe it, and I was determined to make the best of it. After getting registered and settled in our room, which was small, clean, and comfortable, the thing that struck me strange were the heavy, ugly drapes with Abraham Lincoln and George Washington on them. I would have expected a more African cultural motif. It's a hell of a lot better than our previous accommodations, I told my roommate, and it's on the ocean, and water is my weakness. After everyone was settled in their rooms, we took off again, this time to the Cape Coast Castle Dungeons. As we rode, we passed by villages and saw houses made out of mud with thatched roofs. There were mounds of chopped wood neatly stacked together along the sides of dried coconut shells. I was told that this was used for the cooking fire. Everything was so orderly. These were the Airway people's village. They had migrated from the Volta region, which is in the northern part of Ghana. Many were now living in the central region. They caught and smoked fish, which was sent back to the Volta region for sale. They had no electricity or running water or toilets. None of the conveniences we took for granted back in the United States. As I watched the villages as we rode past them, I couldn't help wondering how it must be for our people living in this kind of environment, and I wanted to visit with them. On entering the town of Cape Coast, we saw women carrying large pans and parcels upon their heads, a regular mode of transport it seemed. They carried everything on their heads, from cords, sticks of wood and food, to a table setting for 6 on their heads. They moved so gracefully with their backs straight, never stumbling or missing a beat. They reminded me of graceful swans. I loved it. I wondered if I could do that. Small stores called kiosks lined the streets, and the stench from open sewers hung in the air in certain places. There was hustle and bustle everywhere. New York hustled and bustled, but this was different. Everyone was black, some even looking like family. I was really feeling at home. The warmth and friendliness of the people, the happy, laughing children running up and down, playing, and also begging. As we walked through the town, people called to us, "My brothers, my sisters, you from where? African American, Jamaican, Rasta, Aquaba, oh Bruni." I waved and laughed, experiencing a joy and excitement I'd never felt before. "Oh Bruni," they called. I soon found out that it meant welcome white man or foreigner, and I was none too pleased by that. I had come this far from my own people to see me as a white or a foreigner. Something was terribly wrong with that picture, and it saddened me. We really needed to get to know one another again. As we strolled down the street like we owned the place, a man rushed up and said, "You are all wanted at the palace. You must come now. A palace, someone responded. What kind of palace? And what for? Why should we go with you? At this point, Kohen, who had walked ahead of us, returned to see what was holding us up. Once again, the man repeated his request, but this time with a little more specifics. My chief, Nanembra, wants to see all of you at the palace, now. All right, Kohen responded. Where is the palace? The man then turned and pointed to an old two-story building located in the center of town. Not knowing what to expect and having never met a king, we proceeded to follow the man. Upon arrival at the palace, we were instructed to wait in the reception area until we were summoned to come upstairs. While we were waiting, several of the brothers in the group noticed these huge drums, and in their excitement proceeded to try their hand. Boom, boom, boom sounded the bass drums. Boom, 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 and the brothers were on a roll. The sounds of the drums echoed throughout the room, reverberating off the walls and into the streets. Boom, 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 boomity, boom, 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 the drums sounded repeatedly. Suddenly, someone from the palace came running out, very excited. Dabby, Dabby, stop, stop, the person demanded. You cannot touch the drums of the chief. They are talking drums and call the people to the palace. No one other than those who are permitted may touch them, and only at the command of the chief. Everyone started apologizing at once, but in the midst of the confusion, we were told that the chief was awaiting us. We all felt a little foolish and a little nervous for having violated someone's space, coupled with the fact that we had never met an African chief before and couldn't begin to imagine why he had sent for us. Quietly and a little apprehensive, we mounted the stairs to his quarters. Upon entering, there was a rather large, majestic, but friendly-looking man draped in kente cloth, surrounded by elders and other men in attendance. Please be seated, said the man who escorted us upstairs to the chief's quarters. You are welcome. We quietly took our seats around the room and anxiously awaited for someone to say something. Akwaba, said the man sitting next to the chief. Akwaba. He then instructed us to rise and greet the chief, shaking hands with him and those in attendance. Once that was done, we returned to our seats. Once again, the man standing next to the chief spoke. He called him Ochiami, who translated and spoke for the chief, who, according to custom, did not speak directly to the people. Akwaba, my brothers and sisters, Akwaba. Welcome to the palace of Nana Oza Barimba Kodwo Membra V, the traditional ruler of the Ogwa traditional area. My chief has seen you walking down the street of Cape Coast and wanted to know, who are these strangers? Why are these strange Africans that he has never met? And what is your mission? As Kohen was the leader of the group, he spoke, explaining that we were in Cape Coast for the installment of our friend, and that we were not aware of the custom which required us to come and meet the chief. This is our first time in Africa, Kohen explained, and we did not intend to offend anyone. Now that we are aware, you can be assured that it will never happen again. The ice was broken, and everyone laughed and relaxed as Kohen gave Nanembra a little background history on our group. Everyone even got an opportunity to say something. It was wonderful. We had really met a king. He was so friendly and reminded us of an old family member, especially when it was explained how Nana loved to sit at his window and watch his people and activity that went on in the middle of his town. He reminded me of my grandmother, who used to always sit at the window in her Harlem, New York apartment. She saw everything that went on in the block. Nana said he was very happy to see us and invited us to return home to Africa. where we belonged. He called us his children and said that land was available for us if we wanted it. He said we were Africa's children and this was our homeland. Needless to say, we were overjoyed. Shortly thereafter, happy and elated about this meeting, we assured Nanembra that he would be seeing us again and said our goodbyes. I was too happy. Woo, child. The following year, in 1988, Nanembra, along with his entourage of chiefs, visited with us in the United States. Ben and I were Nanenbra's official limousine service, personally driving he and his entourage around as they visited our homes, our schools, and our community in Mount Vernon and other parts of the country, and inaugurated the first official observance of Juneteenth in a major city in the state of New York. It was at this historic occasion that Nanembra once again invited his sons and daughters in America to come home to Africa. And later requested this celebration be observed in Cape Coast in solidarity with those brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Juneteenth was celebrated for the first time in Ghana on the 19th of June, 1992, in Cape Coast Castle Dungeons, and dedicated to the late Nana Ozabarimba Kodro Membra V, the Omen Hen of Cape Coast. That truly was an exciting time. As I think back on some of the things that we went through, when I think about how much I had grown and how much I had been blessed by being able to return, I knew then that Africa would be my home. I lived in Africa for 35 years, and I'm still here. You know, as the scripture says that in my Father's house there are many mansions. I say in my mother and my father's house there are many mansions, and I have lived in several of them.